Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our presentation of the Hasbro interactive case. We're going to focus today on a problem analysis of the case, and we're going to hand out recommendations of how to improve organizational policies in the future in order to avoid the same mistakes being made. Our agenda for today includes the following points. First, we're going to talk about the problem. We're going to try to identify it, and we're going to try to find causes that underlie the problem. Thereafter, we will look at the involved people, look at their characteristics, their abilities and weaknesses, and how those caused and linked into the problems. Thereafter, we will take a look at the social context within the organization, trying to identify situations that also contributed to the problems. We will after that combine the involved people with the social context and see how in combination those two interacted and contributed to the problems. After that, our analysis will be finished and we will try to give some recommendations to the board of directors here today sitting beside us in order to avoid those problems being made in the future. So let's start with our presentation. As the major problem in the Hasbro case, we identified the product development. Product development should in general be divided into two phases. First, as when Hasbro Interactive started out, where they transformed traditional Hasbro games into interactive games. We could see that Hasbro was doing that fantastically well. They got a really good start in the interactive games market and were able to generate real revenue growth year after year. However, once the traditional games ran out, Hasbro had to start to develop new, from scratch, interactive games. And that's where the problems basically started. Because they needed those new interactive games in order to keep up the revenue growth. Because there was just not enough traditional games in order to continue along the same path of growth. So, our team tried to identify why the new interactive games product development went wrong. We first identified two major factors contributing to the new interactive games product development, which is creativity and project management. After we identified those initial two factors, we tried to figure out what are the drivers of the creativity and the project management. So we saw that creativity is basically influenced by three factors, which is expertise, the ability to creative thinking, as well as motivation. In this case, we figured out that motivation is particularly important and highly influenced the amount of creativity within Hasbro Interactive. Second of all, we identified communication as one of the underlying causes, which both influence creativity and project management. Moving on, decision making influenced project management in a big way, and this was one of the major problems that Hasbro Interactive had to deal with. And finally, we identified as our fourth underlying cause conflict resolution and how Hasbro Interactive dealt with conflicts, which ultimately influence project management, thereby new product development, and contributed to the failure of Hasbro Interactive. So, let's start to examine in more detail the individual causes. First, we will start with motivation and how it went wrong in this regard for Hasbro Interactive. We identified that there is three specific problems within the motivational systems, if you want to call it like that, within the organization. First and foremost, Hasbro Interactive focuses heavily on monetary benefits. As you could see, that in order for them to encourage organic growth, one of their measures was to set revenue goals, which is clearly to be seen as a really hard, so to say, punishment if you don't achieve those rewards. So what does that do to your organization if you focus heavily on monetary benefits? It actually influences your creative thinking process, because once you introduce heavily monetary benefits into your organization, the employees will start with the converging thinking process way too early, thereby missing alternatives that might end up to be more valuable than the actual choices made. Another specific problem we identified was the lack of goal setting. This led to an unclear strategy and thereby less motivation. This is coming from the so-called goal setting theory, where people need clear and achievable goals in order to be motivated. Because this goal setting was lacking, Hasbro Interactive experienced a lack of direction and also a lack of feedback, because if you do not establish clear goals, you will not be able to give your employees good feedback, and hence they will be less motivated. The third specific problem we identified was decreasing autonomy, which is related to the self-determination theory and is one out of the 3 parts. Over the course of Hasbro Interactive, top management of the mother corporation, Hasbro, got increasingly involved in the operational business of Hasbro Interactive, and thereby decreased the autonomy very much. That led to less creativity as well. So all of those 3 mentioned specific problems in the end led to lack of creativity, and therefore influenced the product development process in a negative way. Moving on to communication. We identified 3 specific problems within communication regarding we will first start with that Hasbro Interactive saw, or not Hasbro Interactive, but Hasbro saw the different business units as competitors. However, what that actually achieved was that the business units started to not share information anymore, and that they started to compete instead of cooperating. Furthermore, there was a lack of transparency, which resulted in a distortion of communication, and lack of active listening, which we could see that, for example, one of the employees said they do not feel the need to consult with us because they believe that they know what is going on with the brand. There was an employee from Hasbro criticizing Hasbro Interactive for not actively listening to what they had to say. Those factors resulted in lack of creativity and also poor project management. Moving on to decision making. Here we identified basically 2 major problems. First, that Mr. Dusenberry, head of Hasbro Interactive, was making decisions heavily based on intuition, which is, as we know, not the best. Second of all, decision biases were not systematically controlled for, and both of those problems ended up in irrational decision making, leading to overconfidence, leading to escalation of commitment, and leading to confirmation bias. all of that ending up in poor project management. So the last root cause we identified was conflict management. And there we found that conflicts were resolved through power, and this was something that was fundamentally wrong. It contributed to discouraged functional conflict, which is really important in a creative environment. And it also led to the ignorance of crisis, because the people in charge said what had to happen and nobody else's voice was listened to. That also contributed to poor project management. So, moving on to involved people. We identified 3 people that were involved in all of the 4 causes mentioned above, which was Mr. Dusenberry, Mr. Baum, and Mr. Verrecchia. First, we're going to start with Mr. Dusenberry and how he fits into the personality profile we created. We used the Big 5 personality model in order to characterize the personality traits, and after that tried to identify some abilities and of the involved people. So what we can see with Mr. Dusenberry is that he has a very high trait of extroversion, which means that he's inspiring, but on the other side, more impulsive and risk-taking. Moreover, his openness is quite high as well, which directly translates into an innovative and visionary mindset. But on the other side, also makes him more likely to lead groups in dangerous and independent directions. As abilities, we identified creativity, leadership, and visionary. His weaknesses, however, are really important to consider as well, which are finance, operation, and planning. That's where Mr. Baum comes in. Mr. Baum's one of his most strongest personality traits is conscientiousness, which makes him effective at setting and maintaining goals, but unfortunately likely to lose visionary focus. His abilities match with his personality traits, which are operations, planning, and finance. His weakness is creativity. That's where you see a good complementary fit with Mr. Dusenberry. The third man involved is Mr. Verrecchia, and he can be described as highly neurotic, which makes him more able to detect risks, but also more likely to lose visionary focus in favor of micromanagement. That translates into his abilities as finance, planning, and risk management. However, his weakness is creativity. So this is the end of our analysis, and now we would like to make some recommendations for management team on how to avoid the same problems in the future. So first of all, we would like to focus on improving creativity. We would like to introduce clear, achievable, and acceptable goals, which would make feedback given to employees way easier, and therefore is according to goal-setting theory, which ultimately motivates the workforce, and motivation, as we've heard before, is one of the major factors influencing creativity. Moreover, we would like to give autonomy back to the departments, and we would like to increase relationships between the departments again. This is according to self-determination theory, where autonomy and relationships are 2 of the 3 factors influencing motivation. So, how do we increase relationships between the departments? We would like to encourage cooperation instead of competition between business units. This is a fundamental change of what Hasbro and Hasbro Interactive have been pursuing in the past. Furthermore, we want to establish a mindset where employees acknowledge each other's perspectives. In order to enforce that, we would like to set up an internal platform where employees from all departments and business units can share ideas and thereby enhance creativity. Finally, how can we improve project management? So first of all, for Hasbro Interactive in specific, but also for Hasbro, it really needs to be that short-term as well as long-term plans are developed and updated on a regular basis. This will, for example, make budget allocations or HR allocations way easier and more transparent so that everybody in the organization understands why certain amounts of budgets and HR are distributed in a certain way. Furthermore, we would like to introduce a systematic decision-making process for strategic decisions, meaning decisions that have a big impact on future success of the company. Therefore, we would like to systematically check for cognitive biases. This is according to Mr. Kahneman's theory, where he says that in order to avoid biased decision making, every corporation has to set up some cornerstones where they check their decisions in order to make sure that their decisions are unbiased and to the best of their ability. This also includes check for groupthink, which we think was really apparent in the Hasbro Interactive case. Furthermore, we would like to introduce a stage gate process into each project. This means implementing go and kill decisions throughout a project, and thereby we intend to eliminate the escalation of commitment bias, which was so clearly in the Hasbro Interactive case. Thereby, we want to make top management have to explain, or top management of Hasbro Interactive, for example, to explain the decisions they make and to say whether the project has been successful so far and is therefore allowed to go into the next stage. If not, the project needs to be put on hold or it needs to be abandoned. This will save Hasbro of a lot of future trouble in regards to escalation of commitment due to some individual top managers. Thirdly, we would like to reduce the power distance by actively engaging employees in important strategic decision making. This will close the gap and will create a more comfortable environment where idea sharing is encouraged, and thereby individual mistakes are being mitigated through numerous opinions and minds, thereby also increasing the quality of decision making. Furthermore, in order to improve project management even more, we would like to train top management in conflict and crisis management. As we have seen in the Hasbro Interactive case, this is not one of the strongest points within Hasbro and clearly needs more training and understanding so that top management can react accordingly to crisis and conflict, not using, for example, only the power they have, but actually reflecting on interests of the different parties and where they come from, and actively trying to make a better decision for the corporations. Lastly, we would like to emphasize the importance of transparent communication by telling top management to lead by example, meaning that if Hasbro wants to have a change in the organization, top management must lead by doing. So, in this matter, I would like to thank you all for your attention. We hope that we could bring some clarity into the issue and give some good recommendations for the future. Thank you very much.